Please. And we have from Consul General's office from New York, Mr. Nagy.
All right. Mr. Neil Patel has very fluently and very in a detailed way introduced our chief guest. But let me just say a few more words about him before I request him to come and address you. Isn't it? As a current ambassador to the United States, he took over on the 15th of May 2015. Before taking charge as ambassador, he was also serving as ambassador of India to France in Paris. On 8 March 2015, the Ministry of External Affairs of India announced its decision to appoint him as the next ambassador to the United States. He is a career Indian Foreign Service officer. He had previously served as Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy in Washington, D.C. from 2008 to 2013. He was ambassador to Israel from 2005 to 2008 and as a joint secretary to the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India at New Delhi from 2000 to 2005. Mr. Singh joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1979 after completing his master's in economics from Delhi University and teaching at the university for 2 years. Mr. Singh comes with a lot of experience and a lot of hopes also from us Indians in Central Ohio. In a previous conversation we had with him, he expressed his desire to bring our diaspora closer in trade, education, and culture to India. With that, I would like to request our chief guest to come over and address you, the communities of Columbus, Ohio. So please, Mr. Singh.
Thank you very much. I'd like to first thank FIA for organizing this event and all of you for being here. I'd like to thank the Chairman and President of FIA, Mr. Amar Pandey and Neil Patel, and also for the kind words addressed to me. I wanted to thank and recognize Mr. Nirmal Sinha, who has just been inducted to the Ohio Civil Rights Hall of Fame. And I've known him for many, many years. And in my earlier assignment as Deputy Chief of Mission in Washington, even at that time, he had given me the benefit of his support and advice, and had worked tirelessly, as was mentioned, for promoting relations between India and the United States, including in relation to the civil nuclear deal, which has really transformed the relationship between the two countries. I also wanted to recognize and thank what Neeraj and Tani had to say, because as he mentioned, 5 years ago, when he was still at the university, he came to Washington for an internship program. And both my wife and I had the occasion to meet him and host him at the embassy along with the others. There were about 10 of them, Indian Americans from different parts of the United States, who were doing an internship on Capitol Hill. And we had hosted them also at our house. And we could see that all of them had potential, but Neeraj particularly had potential for public office. So I'm glad he's moving further in that direction. I'm happy to interact with you at a time when the relationship between India and the United States is getting stronger. You'd have seen that President Obama had visited India in January this year. And what was significant was that this was the first time that a US president had ever gone to India on a national day. Republic Day. And at one level it's surprising because Republic Day is the day when we gave to ourselves our constitution, embodying the new framework of Indian democracy after independence. And we are talking of the relationship between the world's oldest democracy, world's largest democracy. And yet this was the first time that a US president went on this particular day, which also reflected the change that is happening in the relationship. And when he went to India in January this year, this was the second time that he had gone to India, because he had visited earlier in 2010. And this is the first time that a US president has ever gone to India twice in his tenure. And if you go back to the earlier visits, before that President Bush had gone to India in 2006, President Clinton in 2000, and before that President Carter in 1978. So you can just in this periodicity of the visits see how the relationship is being transformed. And you can wonder, why is it that the two countries are getting closer? And one of those reasons is that in India we have a strong framework of democratic function. You would have noticed that over the past few weeks we have all been focused on the elections in one of our critical states of Bihar. And of course at one level it is only one state of India, but it has a population of almost 70 million. So it's a very, very significant part of India. But what that election drew our attention to was the fact that last year in May, when we had the general elections in India, the size of the Indian electorate is 830 million. So you take the electorate of the United States, electorate of Europe, electorate of Brazil, electorate of Indonesia, still does not add up to the size of the Indian electorate. And when the elections were held, there was 70% voting. More than 550 million people voted in those elections. We had 1 million polling booths, because no Indian should have to walk more than 1 mile to get to a polling booth, because not everyone has a car. And in one booth in the Gir Forest area, there was one booth for one person. So it is in that framework that we conducted our democratic and electoral process. And again, many of you would have noticed that when we did the elections in India, we did it spread over a period of 4 to 5 weeks, because the security forces were concentrated in one area so that there was no interference with the electoral process. Once the voting was done, they were moved to another area. We conducted the elections there. But once the process was completed and the counting of votes started, and you'll see that again tomorrow when we do the counting of votes in Bihar. Soon we'll start in Bihar in a couple of hours, given the time difference. But when the counting of votes started, when more than 550 million people had voted, within a couple of hours, the trends were clear, and by the end of the day, results were known. And that is because voting in India today is 100% electronic. And it has been that over several electoral cycles. And there are very few countries in the world, even in the most advanced democratic societies, who can claim this kind of a practice in voting processes. So in terms of our democratic and electoral management, the practices in India are among the best in the world. And that's one of the reasons, for example, why the United States has also worked with us and suggested to us that we look at how we can support electoral practices and management in other countries in the world. So that's one dimension. The other dimension, again, why there is a lot of similarity is because if you look around the world, the two countries where you have maximum degree of multiculturalism and pluralism, it's India and the United States. Not many realize that in India we have 22 official languages in our constitution. And how many countries in the world can talk of that kind of an experience, given the languages in our states and what the center has to use sometimes in communication with various states. Several of the major religions of the world emerged from India. Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, and all the other major religions of the world, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, found a welcome home in India. So we have representatives of all religions living in India, again something that we find here in the United States. So given that kind of a background, we find that our relationship in economic, political, defense, security has really advanced over the past few years. In trade and economic terms, for instance, today our trade is about $120 billion. It has increased 5 times in the last 15 years. And the two governments have now said that our target is to take it to a level of $500 billion. There is growing US investment in India, and we have about $30 billion worth of US investment in India. But there is growing Indian investment in the United States. There are about 200 Indian companies who have invested in the US. A survey was done last year of the investments done by these companies. Not everyone responded, about 100 companies responded. And according to the figures of these 100 companies, over the last 5 years, they have invested $15 billion in the US economy, generating 100,000 jobs directly. And then, of course, there's a lot of indirect job creation. So again, it's a two-way flow that is happening in this area. In looking at the defense cooperation, till a few weeks ago, I used to say that we have bought about, or contracted to buy about $10 billion worth of defense supplies from the United States over the past 4 years, more than what we have done with any other country. As of 2 weeks, the figure has increased to $13 billion because we have just contracted to buy additional Apache and Chinook helicopters from the United States. Among the largest number of military exercises that India does with any country, it is with the United States. Similarly, the largest number of bilateral military exercises that the US does with any country outside the NATO, it's with India. And now we have said that we are going to move beyond just a buyer-seller relationship in defense, and also do co-production, co-development of defense technologies. And we have identified 6 Pathfinder projects that our agencies and departments are already working on, and we hope to take that forward with bringing in additional areas of cooperation in defense technology. As you would have noticed, the Prime Minister was in the US in September this year. He had visited last year also, and another visit this year in September. He had come for meetings at the United Nations. He had a meeting with the President. In New York, in addition to that, he had interactions with the representatives of the financial sector, of media and communications, as well as about 40 CEOs of Fortune 500 companies representing manufacturing and investment. The general sense from those meetings was that there was an assessment that a lot of change has happened in India over the past 1 year in terms of ease of doing business, in terms of opening up of areas of investment, and that there was tremendous new opportunity for cooperation between India and the US. And the spirit of that was captured again when the Prime Minister went to the West Coast, to California, for meetings in the San Jose area. And the meetings there, given the strengths in that area and what it embodied in terms of potential for India-US cooperation, focused on broadly 4 themes: digital technology, entrepreneurship and innovation, renewable energy, and startups. And I can tell you, for example, that the event we had done focusing on digital technology symbolized what is already happening between India and the US, and of course the potential. Because before the Prime Minister laid out his vision of digital India, there were 5 CEOs of US companies who spoke about what they were already doing in India and the trends in technology also in the United States. And these companies were Cisco, Qualcomm, Microsoft, Google, and Adobe. And the CEOs of these companies were John Chambers, Paul Jacobs, Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, Shantanu Narayan. So if you just look at these names, you can immediately see the dimensions that are already there of India-US cooperation. In fact, somebody said that one of the most effective exports that India has now done over the past few years has been the export of CEO of multinational corporations. But going beyond that, we find that in the startup sector, there's again huge potential for cooperation. In the last 2 years, $4 billion have flowed into startups in India. And there's suddenly new energy in the startup sector in India. 3 unicorns have emerged from India. And we find that already in these areas, there is huge collaboration between India and the United States. And the US is a world leader, it's a global leader in innovation. But in some of the cutting-edge innovation happening in the United States, including on the West Coast, Indian companies and Indian origin tech entrepreneurs are an integral part of what is happening. And we are contributing to the process of innovation in the United States. We are able to contribute because a certain amount of niche, cost-effective R&D and innovation is happening in India. In terms of my work, I have had the opportunity to meet CEOs of companies in Israel, in France, in the United States, and they tell me that they have all looked at doing certain amount of R&D in India, not just with an aim on the Indian market, but to remain globally competitive. Because in India, we are relatively deficient in capital, relatively scarce in technically trained manpower, so we approach the innovation challenges from a somewhat different perspective. And you may have noticed that last year in September, we sent a space vehicle to the Mars, 1 week after the US space vehicle went to the Mars. Of course, the US space vehicle did have more capability and capacity, but the cost of our space vehicle to the Mars was 1/10 the cost of the US space vehicle at $65 million. And it was less than the cost of production of a Hollywood movie dealing